I actually I want to tell a story of how I trolled about 400 of my European colleagues. I was I'm a networker. I am not an overpaid mechanic. I'm an overpaid plumber. I work for the National Research Network in Ireland, which is literally based across the road there. So I was surprised to see this is going on here, and I had no idea this venue existed. It's so cool. And two coincidences happened last year. One is that I transitioned gender in a few months back, and the other is that before that happened, I was invited to give a presentation to at a conference, bunch of my colleagues, people like our company, but in other countries in Europe. We all have one each, and knowing that they were kind of into interesting topics, I said, let's do a talk about LGBT and the internet. And they went for it. So seeing the opportunity, I went, hang on a second, so something we do here. This is the first time a lot of them are going to see me presenting as female. I've been hanging around the industry for years, so a lot of them know me, but they're going to be a bit not sure on what's going on here. And I stood up and very sincerely I went, I did something a few months ago that had a big impact on my career. A lot of people describe it as brave. I think some people behind my back might have said it was foolish. And it was going to have an impact on my work one way or another, and we didn't know what it was going to be until I tried it. Last April, I changed the username on my federated login, and you're not really supposed to do that. And it actually, I mean, the whole process got me thinking, and it really kind of it led to this talk, because the whole way that our work affects the LGBT community really came home to me. When I describe myself as a plumber, I really kind of mean it. We work on a lower level than most people notice, except when something breaks. By breaks, I usually mean a JCB has dug something up. And that is not a joke. That's absolutely real. I have a ticket in our ticket system going back years of a petrol station being robbed in the middle of the country. And in trying to rob the petrol station, the robbers decided to cut the power, but they went through the phone lines, and therefore they went through the internet. That sort of thing happens. But the stuff we do, normally I think of, I'd love to contribute, I'd love to contribute code or I'd love to contribute some sort of helpful design thing, but we work on such a low level. But I was wrong, because everything we do, the work we do affects so many people in different ways that you don't really notice until you look. So I kind of went back and started looking at my history, LGBT history, and how things have changed in Ireland and elsewhere over the time that basically the internet has been developed. So I went back, looked at the 80s and the 70s and a bit further. And one handy way to look at that is to look at sort of the two of the biggest campaigns that have happened for LGBT rights, and look at how they were covered. The first one in this country, I think, was around decriminalisation, and the most recent one, of course, was equal marriage, which led to the referendum last year. When it comes to decriminalisation, there's a saying, those who are visiting Ireland, if you've asked for directions, may have gotten the answer, well, I wouldn't start from here. Which 25, 30 years ago was really where we were when it came to LGBT rights in Ireland. The pace of change has been astonishing. Mainstream access was basically impossible. It wasn't there. Even if you got access, you wouldn't know if you're going to get a sympathetic hearing. You wouldn't even really know if you're going to get a balanced hearing. There was no political support in the mainstream, so it was a tough place to start. And if you've no way to get good coverage, it doesn't matter how good your arguments are, no one's going to hear them. So what's changed since then? What's changed is, by the way, there's a bunch of things. I'm going to put a link at the end of this talk to my notes. It's actually for an expanded version of this talk. It has links to videos and some of the sources I'm using. One of the videos I'd like to point you at, which I won't play right now, but it's an ad by Belong To, the LGBT group, for the referendum called Bring Your Family to Vote. Just adorable. I played it at the conference a couple of months ago, and people started to cry. It was fantastic. And the big message behind that is, we can't win this on our own. Bring your family with you. Bring your friends with you. We need help. And when you talk, you win people over, and it becomes mainstream. And things are mainstream when in Vienna they change the traffic lights. Isn't it gorgeous? You can't do something like this without someone complaining about it. Only in this day and age, you don't complain about, when we're supporting LGBT rights, we can't have that. You complain about the cost. Someone did. One of the politicians did. My friend Marlene took these photos, and she said the response from, I think, from the Green Party was, you're right. It costs too much to change them. Let's just leave them up there. That's coverage. But in a political campaign, coverage isn't enough. You also need canvas. Can you imagine going door to door for gay rights in this country 30 years ago? Can you even imagine it? People did, but holy cow. The way a canvas works, the way this stuff really works is political parties are geared toward elections, but they participate in a referendum, and they're the only people who really had the infrastructure to get people out, going door to door and having those conversations, which is the only way you can really change people's minds, is having those conversations with them. And at the local level, that used to be, you'd have like a politician secretary would ring up a bunch of people, ring around and see, can we get people out this evening? But there was something very different about the marriage equality referendum. The level of engagement was phenomenal. What we saw in Ireland was, I spoke actually to Noel Whelan, which a lot of you might recognise as someone who was quite involved in the campaign, has been involved in politics for a long time. And he was really surprised. As a straight man, he said the way the LGBT community were engaged so intensely, not just canvassing, but following everything on Twitter and everything. The way he said was, there's never been a level of internet engagement with opinion as it was about the marriage referendum, which is all very well if you're posting on Twitter, but you can't harness that. He described Yes Equality as a pop-up political machine. He said instead of politicians ringing around, you have it became sort of the discipline of, right, at 6:30 on a Tuesday we'll start at this public house, and at 6:30 on Wednesday we'll meet here, and so on. And the front page of the Yes Equality website, I'm sure a lot of you saw it, but what really struck me, basically it was a Google Doc. It was a Google document with, if you were in this location on this day and you want to go canvassing, phone this person and meet here. And if you're in this other location, phone this person and meet here. Oh, and by the way, here's a video to show you how to canvass. Which is great, if you're saying the right things. How do you know if you're saying the right things? Well, pre-internet, of course, now the problem is you didn't have great coverage. You don't have a canvassing infrastructure, so you got this bad chicken-egg situation. Politicians don't see it as a vote winner, it's a vote loser, probably. So you can't make your arguments, and that means you can't get feedback on them. No way to adjust them. Bits of that actually remain today. You have this sort of 50-50 rule in the mainstream media, particularly state broadcasters, which is kind of funny because it's sort of, you have to be fair, so we'll document fairness as much as we can. We'll time everything down to the minute. And that's kind of weird, because imagine giving 50% of time to an anti-climate change argument or an anti-vaccine argument. I say pandering to the crowd. And the big worry with a popular vote for minority rights, I kind of surprised and upset a couple of my friends when I pointed this out to them. They're going, the referendum, isn't that great? And I was going, well, minority rights up for a popular vote. Doesn't that bother you? And I pissed on that parade. But the whole thing was, on a very practical level, when people are mostly not going to directly benefit, why should they support it? That was the real worry. And all the doubts are getting 50% time on the media. All you need to do is plant some doubts, and people might go, maybe I won't chance it. Maybe things are okay the way they are. But now we have this way to reach people, broadcast style, without a mediator. You've got this hugely motivated group of people willing to go door to door. You have a really powerful way to organise that group, and they're all on WhatsApp. That means it's two-way. That means you're getting feedback. You've got this The communication's working both ways. And Noel was saying he and the others in HQ could see what the canvassers were reporting back in, that when the debates were going on, they were getting, TV debates and so on, they were getting a lot of coverage, but they weren't moving opinion. They knew they had it right. The talking points were right. The things that people were worried about, they knew they understood it. But from the outside, the rest of us couldn't really see that. We saw the posters, we saw the coverage, we saw some really crappy things being said about us. And it was tough. And it really started to get to me, I think, a few days before the referendum. And then I vividly remember, I think it was the Tuesday beforehand, I was feeling annoyed, and I got off the train just after work, turned left, walked out of the station, and I saw this, and I thought, maybe it's going to be okay. And then this happened. Oh, who remembers this? Twitter just filled up with photos like this. Dylan Haskins posted this. Colm O'Regan said, home to voters like when you're watching The Hobbit and an army of elves you've forgotten about Murray the film arise from over a hill. Annie West drew that. Who remembers this? You must have seen this. Just gorgeous. What Noel said to me was, he expected the referendum to pass, but not with a big turnout. He thought most people would decide, I'm not going to block it. I'm not mad about it, but I'm not going to block it. But with the internet giving mainstream access, organising people going door to door, giving the campaign the feedback it needed, 2 to 3 weeks before the referendum itself, something very strange happened. Because people suddenly realised, hang on a second, I've heard all these stories, I see what's going on. This is no longer a matter of abstract constitutional change. This is people's lives. And people all over the country made the decision not just to not block it, but they really made the positive decision to share marriage with those who didn't have it. And it passed 62 to 38, and it relied on having the internet to form a community. So let's talk about community. But to talk about community, we kind of need to talk about labels. I don't mean the stickers that we're wearing. I have a funny relationship with labels. Because I like my labels. Sometimes I'll be having a conversation with people, or I'll be having a conversation about some LGBT topic, and someone very well-meaning will step in and go, why do we have to have all these labels? Why do we have to be LGBT? Why can't we all be people? To which my answer is, okay, I know where you're coming from, but the labels are my method for identifying my needs, which are different from yours. If a label is being forced on me, that's a problem, yes. But if I'm choosing one, sometimes I need to be able to do that. The labels are the means by which I find my community. And community is important. Tony Walsh, who's the curator of the Irish Queer Archive, said communities where people address their fears and imagine their desires and quantify their needs. The way that was done pre-internet was 3 ways. And what struck me actually, between physical centres, sort of telephone helplines and whatever newsletters you could get, was how fragile they were. It's changed now because obviously there's this huge commercial scene, although there's issues with that, as we heard from some of the earlier talks. And not everyone is well served by the commercial world, but all 3 of these could come under attack, accidental or deliberate. This is what the telephone helpline in Dublin, the number of calls they got in the 80s, in the middle of the 80s. And the reason it went down in 1988 was the physical centre caught fire. Therefore, the telephone centre went away, and then you're kind of stuck with, right, the only sort of link people have with each other is newsletters, and you can't do very much in the mainstream media. They won't even take like small ads from meet and greets. So you're relying on stuff sold in indie shops and the like. So what does the government try to do? Government tries to ban it. The big problem here is that there's nothing wrong with being LGBT, but we do soak up the same messages as everyone else. So discovering this sort of thing about yourself can be difficult, and you need to get support. So when the support infrastructure is fragile, that's a problem. What we have now, though, well, this is one of the things that really struck me, which is on this very topic. How do you reach people who we can't otherwise reach? And the idea, of course, was we'll get people to record a video, just telling people, look, it does get better. And lots of people recorded videos. Companies arranged it with their employees. Famous people, Barack Obama made one, Joe Biden made one. And I played this one for people.
Growing up isn't easy, and especially if you feel different or not understood. And other people make life hard because of that.
Does anyone recognize this person? You recognize Neelie Kroes. She was European Commissioner for Digital Agenda until 2014. I stood up and put this video in front of several hundred people who recognized her as formerly their main funding body, and they went, oh.
I want you to know that every person is as valid and worthy as all other people, you included. And it's terrible when someone makes you feel inferior, whether it is teasing, whispering, bullying, or anonymous hate messages to your phone and email, and none of that is okay.
Seeing someone like that take a stand like that, I think really helps. Obviously, it's going to be helpful to the people whom the video was aimed at, but seeing someone really take that sort of stand helps it to be taken seriously for everyone who works in that area and who looks to that person for leadership or for money. So are things better now? Well, I look back at the academic community. I'm not an academic. I haven't, I graduated with my BSc, grabbed the degree and ran, but I didn't run very far. I ended up in academic services. But I do, I'm a tech person. I work off numbers. What numbers can we get? Student dropout rates. We know the student dropout rates are higher for LGBT people, but how much higher? Well, the National Union of Students in the UK did a survey about 2 years ago, and what they discovered is about 25% of straight cisgender students seriously consider dropping out. Fine, that's their baseline, and if the others are higher, we know there's a problem. So how much higher? Gay students comes out at 27-28%, which looks small, but that's a difference of about 15%, so there's something going on there. For lesbian students, it's a bit smaller, 26%. For bi students, I take the opportunity to point out a lot of people might assume, not in this room, but a lot of people might assume that if you cover gay and lesbian, you kind of automatically cover bi by default. But the numbers are higher, so there's something else going on. And if you're thinking that one policy covers everyone, it's not enough. There's something else going on there. And for trans students, it's more than half, which is why it comes back to identity, right? So, which is just something that's really core. We all experience these pressures. Perhaps LGBT people more than most, but everyone does. I spent 40 years kind of learning to be male, and now I'm unlearning that and unwinding that. How do you do that? Some of you might know Rachel Moore, who's the founder of Express Your Gender, and her thing about this is she looked at the advice out there, particularly for transitioning people, and she said, look, it's kind of lacking, actually. A lot of it's very prescriptive. Women walk like this and sit like this, and men do this and whatever. It's based on stereotypes. Even the best advice is kind of only okay. But she knows the best stuff tended to be based on observation. So her thing is all about observation. And what she's done, she's putting this together. This is all developer demo stuff. It's not launched yet, but she's making a website where the notion is she's gathered a bunch of the good observational data that's already out there. These seats don't have armrests, so when I point out the thing about men hugging armrests is actually true. I'm not expecting to see anyone shift uncomfortably in their seats, but it's great when you see that happen. But the existing studies, like I said, are limited. So what can you do? She's making a forum. And the whole thing is get people to do real observations. But the problem with that is, if you're going to do good observations, you kind of have to go out there and note things down and log it when you get home and open your computer. But now we have mobile phones. Let's make an app. You log in, you tell it what kind of user you are, and then you just go, sit, have a coffee, wait at the train station, just people watching, which is what people do. Start making observations. And what the thing is doing is, it's better than just a pencil and paper. Her thing is, the app is guiding you in being objective, is what you actually see, as opposed to what you think is going on. You write your observation and you submit it. Isn't that cool? A big thing in networking is you can't change what you don't measure. And I think there's something very interesting going on when we're all carrying around these like pocket supercomputers. I wear a watch that measures my heart rate, and it's probably pretty high right now. But it can let me participate in medical trials, and this sort of thing. I mean, it's getting observations, real observations, has been a barrier that's just now starting to crumble. And she firmly believes this doesn't just apply to trans people. We're all vulnerable to these pressures, and the difference is really in having access to that information. It can make a difference, particularly, she says, if you discover this unsatisfaction with gender or generally with behaviour, that gets you maybe 70% of the way, and then you're stuck. How do you get the other 30%? And this kind of thing, I think, really could make a difference, because it's all about identity, right? And then I realised, oh, hang on a second. What needs do LGBT people have? Well, we're talking about a group which is very often, as we've heard, outside the mainstream. I work for a non-profit in the educational area, which serves users outside the mainstream. We're talking about a community which is often not well served by the commercial market. We do things differently from the commercial world in our industry. And identity is very important. We're in the business of identity. Oh dear. You probably all know the page Falsehoods Programmers Believe About Names, and the link is on the website at the end if you want to follow. There's also Falsehoods Programmers Believe About Gender. For example, a person has one legal gender that is consistent across all their forms of identification. Hi. Also. And that became very real for me when I went to change my username. And whatever about, hello, my colleagues, team, I want to tell you that I'm going to transition gender and it's going to start next week. Oh, cool, well done, that's really cool, you're very brave. Hi, I'd like to change my federated username. Oh my God, are you sure? We build things based on averages, and averages are misleading. I know just enough statistics to be dangerous. If the average works out, most people work out most of the time. A few people work out almost none of the time. So we make assumptions like a person's username isn't going to change, and I'm left with a choice. Either I leave the incorrectly gendered name there, or I change it, and now I'm dealing with something that will have there will be some breakage which will affect my job, and we've no way to predict how much. And it gets even worse when you think about real names, because for a long time there, for about 18 months, my name changed when I left the office. What's my real name in that situation? It's tough to thread that needle without disclosing both my names. And now I'm having a conversation, not just about names, but about gender identity and labeling myself. And I'm giving myself a particular minority status, and I didn't choose to do that. Even my iPad betrayed me. I changed the name of my iPad to Anna's iPad a few months before I transitioned in work. And then I was using it for a video conference. It's a great device for video conferencing. What I didn't know when I joined the video conference was it was transmitting the device name to the other end, putting it on the screen, until someone said to me, "Can you not get your own iPad?" Which is a point of pride that I have my own iPad, thank you very much. Don't stand in it, don't stand in it. Actually, changing my username in the end went really well, but the main reason that, we had preparations in place, I had people set, I'd warned people, I'd made the trade-off, because I had a trade-off between when you make a change, you want to have a long lead-up, but when I transitioned, I wanted the gap to be short. How do you deal with that trade-off? Okay, I said, I'll transition on this day, but I'll do the username change a few weeks later, or we'll just deal with it in between. And it went pretty well, but partly because I'm on a first-name basis with every single person I needed to get this change to go well. If I was a student in some university in some country somewhere, going through a help desk, and that help desk goes through another help desk, and they go up to a third party, and back down, and you iterate a few times because then you discover something else is broken and you keep doing this. What took me about a day could take weeks or months. Which, when you're dealing with an important emotional life change, you might just not bother. And maybe that's where we need to end up. Maybe it's okay. Maybe you just have to go, look, it's not worth the cost to engineer for the minority. it sucks to be you, but only a very small minority of people will ever change the names, right? You know, trans people, married women. It's amazing the reactions I got to this in rehearsal, because women would be almost jumping at me in the previous slide going, and married women, and men look at this and go, oh shit. Let's go back to those numbers. Let's go the dropout stats again, right? What can we do about this? Why are these rates higher? Well, the NUS asked this as well. The biggest reason, they went back and asked what the reasons for dropping out were, and they change depending on whether you identify as LGBT or as trans, but the biggest reason in each case is not fitting in. And that goes back to the stuff we do. Rachel has met a lot of people who are in college or who used to be in college and they couldn't get access, or they couldn't get their transcripts changed, or they had their email name changed or not their username, which to me as an engineer goes, well, a username is kind of a mostly opaque cookie that people mostly never see and you can just deal with it. But she was gone, people go into class and the lecturer prints off a class to call the roll, and if that name is wrong, then every single time the lecturer has to remember to scribble out John and write in Mary, and one of those days the lecturer is not going to do that, is going to forget, because the lecturer is fallible, a human being, and they're going to give the wrong name, and that's really painful. So what can we do? Well, we're the ones who put these systems in place, right? So they get used in ways that we don't expect, and they're inflexible. So it's on us. It's not just that we can make a difference, it's that for the stuff we do, we're the only people who can make a difference, and therefore we're the ones who get to make a difference. We do make some boneheaded decisions sometimes. I once had a conversation with my boss, honest to God, where we talked about banning Hotmail. Can you imagine? And we had no idea how important this was, and how important it already was to some people at that time. So how do we not screw this up? There's some obvious changes we can do. Gender boxes, for example. And do you really need to know someone's gender? There's some links about this at the end as well. But really it comes down to listening to your users, right? This is the manual. Because our industries hold such power in affecting daily lived experience for people, for our customers, and for people who we don't think of as our customers. But every time we go, look, that's just an exception, what we're really doing is forcing a call through that chain of help desks, and we lose a percentage of those people when we do that. Because there's only so many times you can justify your identity to someone who's very busy and whose job requires you to fit in a box that they're ticking. This graph is something that's very well known to NRENs, and I think it's worth looking at. Normally what it represents is number of users and how much bandwidth they consume. And the way we think about this is we have users who are, at one end of the graph, that's thousands and thousands of people checking their Gmail, if you haven't banned it. And at this end is physicists swapping traffic for CERN, which is huge traffic. And the whole point of this graph is we have different types of user and we have to cater to them all. And I looked at that and I went, this doesn't have to be about bandwidth, this could be about anything. This is about serving users no matter what their needs are, and making sure that we're able to accommodate that. It's not just that we can make a difference in the LGBT community, it's that for the particular work we do, we're the only ones who can make that difference. Thank you very much.